What's all this about liberals being called useful idiots? I repeat, the man who wrote this is Paul Roebling, Roebling. Here we go. Useful idiots is a pejorative term that was used by the Soviets to describe Soviet sympathizers in Western countries, and in the United States in particular. It is thought that the Soviet leader Lenin was the first to use the term, and it was used by the Soviets for many years to ridicule misguided Americans who were willing to take the Soviet Marxist side against their own country. Some say that today the term useful idiots can be used to describe those who support a malignant cause which they have naively believed to be a force for good. This is an attempt on the part of the liberals to deflect the label of useful idiots from themselves. Thus, we have hippie Marxist liberals saying that the term useful idiots was used by the Soviets to refer to American capitalists and not the hippie Marxist liberal supporters of communism. Well, American liberals operate under the rules provided by the Marxist Saul Alinsky, who said that any means were justified to bring about Marxism in the United States. So, if the hippie Marxist liberals say that capitals were the useful idiots to which the Soviets referred, then this lie is justified, and the more often the lie is repeated, the greater number of weak-minded and uninformed individuals that will believe the lie. The killing fields is another term that the hippie Marxist liberals have tried to dilute by using it to refer to anything but the real killing fields of Cambodia, for which the hippie Marxist liberals bear most of the responsibility. Marxists have used the term useful idiot since the earliest days of the Soviet Empire right up to the Vietnam War and the eventual collapse of communism in Russia when they referred to their liberal supporters. In 1933, President Franklin Roosevelt recognized the Soviet Union based, in great part, on the reports of the New York Times columnist Walter Duranty, who received a Pulitzer Prize in 1932 for his reporting on a famine in the Ukraine area of the Soviet Union. Duranty had whitewashed the famine, saying it wasn't that bad, and that Joseph Stalin and the Soviet government were not responsible for the famine. In reality, Joseph Stalin was withholding food from the people in Ukraine, and even sending the food the Ukrainians produced elsewhere. The people in the Ukraine were resisting Soviet policies, and Joseph Stalin engineered the famine, which had reached genocidal proportions, to punish the people in the Ukraine and to bring them into line. Walter Duranty and the New York Times knew about the scope and cause of the famine in the Ukraine, but the New York Times had an agreement with Soviet authorities to only print the official Soviet line, hence the term, I suppose, all the news that fits. Oh, that's fit to print. That's right, it's the Rolling Stone that uses all the news that fits. Yeah. Both the New York Times and Walter Duranty were acting as useful idiots. You can't get much more liberal than the New York Times, and Walter Duranty was cut from the same cloth. About the same time in the 1930s, another liberal hero, Margaret Mead, exclaimed that great progress for humanity was being made in the Soviet Union. Margaret Mead, her quote is, never doubt that a small group of dedicated individuals can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. I have a few of her books, one called In the Field. And what is she doing? Holding little black African children, right? The hypocrisy is unending. Now, some of these are my words, but I'm going to get back to the article now. Margaret Mead was another useful idiot who sang the praises of the Soviet Union while Joseph Stalin imprisoned, butchered, and starved to death millions of innocent Russians. Think enough millions to wipe out the top 10 cities in the United States. Times 2. Mead was the ultimate liberal, an ardent feminist, of course, and as it turns out, not very bright. She obtained a degree in psychology, which is like not going to college at all. Then she joined the Franz Boas at Columbia University to study cultural anthropology, which is just another name for the bogus field of psychology. And Franz Boas was also trained in psychology and not in anthropology. After being anointed by Franz Boas, Margaret Mead went off to Samoa to study the primitive society there, which she found to be relaxed, sexually free, egalitarian, and permissive. Years later, Derek Freeman, a real anthropologist, found Samoan society to be puritanical, authoritarian, unequal, and punitive. Just as in her false impression of the Soviet society, Margaret Mead saw what she wanted to see and not what was before her eyes. In other words, Mead was easily duped by both the Soviets and the people of Samoa. Years later, some of the Samoans who had met Margaret Mead told Freeman that they had lied to Margaret Mead, telling her what they thought she wanted to hear. Liberals today vociferously defend Margaret Mead and her conclusions about Samoan society in the late 20s. The arrogance of liberals must never be underestimated. Liberals believe that they can never be wrong on any subject. Liberals also still defend Rachel Carson, even though her book, Silent Spring, was a complete fraud and led to the death of between 37 million and 90 million people from malaria in Africa and Asia. The evil that liberals defended was banning DDT because they believed DDT was harmful to birds, people, and the environment, when in reality, DDT was saving millions of lives. That mistake made the liberals involved, useful idiots in the defense of the environment and animal rights movements.